Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to all of our nominees. So after a 2018 Reuters investigation found that military families were living in homes that were filled with mold, pest infestations, and other safety hazards, this committee opened an inquiry and instituted a slate of reforms in 2019 to hold private military housing contractors accountable. One of these reforms was the creation of a tenant bill of rights to ensure that military families have the quality housing that they deserve. Another was the creation of a public database for military families to report when their landlords fail to provide that quality housing. So I'm glad that the DoD finally created that database called the Housing Feedback System last year. I'm sorry that service members had to wait 5 years for it. DoD needs to do better to rebuild trust with military families. Mr. Marks, if you are confirmed, it will be your job to make sure that service members and their families have, quote, safe, high quality, and affordable housing. So will you commit to preserving and using DoD's housing feedback system to hold private military housing contractors accountable?
Senator, thank you for that. And as someone who has been a military housing resident, I greatly appreciate the additional oversight to include that database which has been implemented. I've watched that roll out at the local installation level. If confirmed, you have my commitment. We will continue to build transparency and trust with our residents. We owe them that.
Good. I appreciate that, and I appreciate your strong response here. So while the reforms we've put in place are an important start, military families are still being treated like second-class citizens by unscrupulous landlords. At Fort Belvoir, the housing conditions in these private homes were so reprehensible that families couldn't even live there. But the families had to continue paying rent for their unlivable homes while they made do in temporary housing. Mr. Marks, do you agree that military families deserve the same tenant protections provided to their civilian neighbors? So, for example, the right to terminate their leases if their landlord fails to address safety hazards, or the right to sue their landlord for relief if their family got sick because of poor conditions in the home?
Senator, we owe our residents the highest standards of quality in homes, and to continue to make robust the both informal and formal dispute resolution processes. And if confirmed, I would want to work with you in this committee to see what we can do.
My question is, should our military families have the same rights that their civilian neighbors have to insist under local and state laws to get protection?
Senator, I understand there are some laws to include the Enclave Act that needs to be addressed. And so what I would want to do is, if confirmed, dig deeper to see how we could address that. I do believe that residents do need to have robust rights to include where they live.
Well, you know, we already have a pretty bad example here, because these families at Fort Belvoir tried to file claims under the Virginia Consumer and Housing Protection Laws, and their complaints were dismissed because of the Enclave Doctrine. This is the doctrine that says on federal lands, tenants may not be entitled to the same rights as other members of the state or community. I want to work with my colleagues to address this in the NDAA, but DoD also recently provided a response to a letter that I sent with Senators Ossoff and Kaine that said the military services already have the authority to require private military housing companies to take corrective action and can negotiate to provide families with additional rights. So let me ask you, Mr. Marks, will you work with this committee and the military services to fight for and enforce military families' housing protection rights and ensure they receive the safe and quality, high quality housing they're entitled to?
Senator, if confirmed, you have my commitment to work with this committee, you and others and the services On behalf of our residents, we owe them that for the service that they give our great nation.
I appreciate that, and I hope this is something we'll take up in the NDAA. We have a duty to make sure that military families' homes are safe so they can stay focused on the mission of keeping the rest of us safe. And substandard housing conditions hurt military readiness. That's a problem we could fix. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.